Good morning and welcome to Farm Factor. I'm your host, Jamie Bloom. Today, Gregg Doud joins us to discuss China and the details of the ongoing trade war. Then we'll turn to this week's Kansas Soybean update. Then Gregg Doud is back as he finishes his discussion on China and trade. Then it's this week's Kansas Farm Bureau update, and we'll end with Plain Talk featuring Kyle and Duane. Stay with us.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com. This segment brought to you by Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture. To join today or more information, go to kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome to Farm Factor. Up first today, Gregg Doud discusses China and trade with an audience during the Governor's Ag Summit.
Everywhere I go in 5 months, I've probably given at least 50, maybe 75 of these talks. And in every one of them, I do this, Jackie. This is your homework assignment. It's on USTR's website. This is the 14-page executive summary. There is a 200-page document. This document is entitled Findings of the Investigation into China's Acts, Policies, and Practices Related to Technology Transfer, Intellectual Property, and Innovation under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. In English, what is that talking about? That accounts China's cybersecurity theft, intellectual property theft, forced technology transfer, licensing regimes. Folks, that 200-page document was 8 months worth of work by some of the best people in our government, 4,000 person hours, looking at all of this. And by tabulation of all that, it accounts for the fact that we think the problem here is somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 billion. So that's where that first $50 billion came from. And China's reaction to that was, well, we don't like what you're doing here, so we're going to retaliate against you for $50 billion. And of course, the president said, let me make myself clear, we're serious. So when we import $500 billion from China and we export $150 billion to China, the president's next step was, I see your $50 billion, China, and I raise you $200 billion. Do I have your attention now? What is the president of the United States trying to say? Well, let me explain it to you from agriculture's perspective. I want you to understand that right now, we have, in agriculture, two of the biggest WTO cases in history against China in agriculture. You see, China, somewhere along the line here, decided in the last few years, apparently, that it didn't want to play by the rules any longer. And what I mean by that is this. Do you realize since 2010, China has not reported to the WTO what it spends on its subsidies to farmers? And this WTO case, this issue first came to my attention when I was working for Senator Roberts on the Ag Committee in 2011. It took us about 5 years to get it up and running, and the Obama administration filed the WTO case, and now we're getting towards the close of this, and the problem is this takes a long time. But again, we think China has spent in excess of what it was allowed to do under the WTO on its farmers by somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 billion. The example that I give in terms of, we ask, well, what do we want in agriculture? What do we want in this relationship with China? Let me give you just one example. If you look at USDA's World Ag Supply and Demand Report numbers of the last 3 years, you'll notice China's corn stocks have come down from 110 million tons to 60 million tons. Let me give you some context there. U.S. corn ending stocks were about 55 million tons. How did they get to 110 million tons? Well, it's pretty easy when your support price is over $9 a bushel. And in fact, today, China's support price in wheat is double the world price. About 52% of the world's residual supply of wheat is in one country, command and control, operated by state-owned entities and a communist party. Our point is this, folks. If we don't address this, what they're doing in these commodities is costing every farmer in the world money.
Folks, come back after these messages for this week's Kansas Soybean Update.
Valley Vet Supply is devoted to providing information and professional quality products at reasonable prices.
Valley Vet Supply.
With nearly 100 years of broadcasting excellence, Ren Radio is now live on the internet playing hit songs of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Join Jack Diamond, Mac Collins, Les Glenn, Frankie C., Antonio Barber, Wings Callahan, and the real Don Steele for some of the best music ever recorded. Hear it at rendigitalmedia.com or get the Ren Oldies Radio app in Play Store or App Store and tell Alexa, good times and great oldies on Ren Internet Radio.
This segment is brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff. Progress powered by Kansas farmers.
Welcome back to Farm Factor and the Kansas Soybean Update.
This is the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Dr. Kevin Donnelly, professor of agronomy at Kansas State University, joins us. Dr. Donnelly, the Kansas State Fair recently took place, and they had a soybean plant judging competition that took place during the fair.
It's been a very popular exhibit, actually, in the crops division, and so the Kansas Soybean Commission sponsors that, and we were fortunate to be selected to judge, and so there is a good amount of premiums that are awarded for that as well.
Who were the winners of the maturity groups, and who was the overall champion?
Our results for this year, our overall champion was actually from the maturity group 3, Mindy Young from Lancaster. We did have more entries in the 4s, but it was an exceptional sample and probably moved it to the top. So the top winners in Class 3 were Mindy at Lancaster. The top winner in the Class 4 was Ray Ladd from Effingham.
What were the overall takeaway messages from this year's entries?
I think part of the challenge, both for selecting plants and for judging them, there's so much variability in soybean plants in a field down the row. A lot of that is influenced by plant population and so forth, and we're trying to judge these for visual display of what is a really robust plant. Those unfortunately may not always reflect final yield in the field because soybeans have a great ability to adjust. If they're at higher populations, they tend to be less branch plant. Even if there's good pod set, they're not necessarily a lot of pods per plant. If they're out by themselves, they turn into kind of a bushy tree and look like they have a lot more plants. So we kind of try to keep that in mind. You know, if we have a reasonable population, we should generally see a little bit of branching, and that gives us a little more robust plant with more pods per plant. For potential future contestants, probably pull up more than just 5 and kind of screen them looking for ones that are sort of uniform and have that good pod set. That's the main thing we're looking for.
And how did the soybean pods look this year?
We had some really nice samples. Good pod set all the way from bottom to top of the plant. We had a lot of drought stress early in the season, at least in some areas of the state, but some of the later ones maybe were a little short on pods toward the bottom, but even some of those are setting quite a bit now at the top. But we did have some really nice samples with good robust plants that had good pod set all the way up.
That's Dr. Kevin Donnelly, professor of agronomy at Kansas State University, who joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Learn more at kansassoybeans.org. For Kansas Soybeans, I'm Greg Akagi.
Hope you enjoyed this week's Kansas Soybean Update. Stay with us after the break for more with Gregg Doud as he finishes his talk on China and trade.
What if sustainability were synonymous with U.S. soy? If energy efficiency, water quality, and soil health help define U.S. soy's value, that future is here, the time is now. To meet end-user demands, the Soybean Checkoff is committing to sustainability that's achievable, worthwhile, and enduring. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff. Progress powered by Kansas farmers.
All over the country, more and more communities are making the change to biodiesel made from U.S. soybean oil. And the decision continues, improving the health and welfare for millions of Americans while adding billions to our national economy.
Sure Crop Fertilizers was started by my father, Don Sherman, and my mother, Shirley Sherman. Family business that started in the 80s. We predominantly focus on plant nutrients and what we can do to give growers better responses with the fertilizer dollars that they do, and what we can do to make those things work better for the grower. We're based out of Seneca, Kansas. We work with growers in their soil analysis to figure out what they need, and then we can put those in a blend that gives them the best results, and so that we can deliver that direct to their farm so that they have those nutrients where they need them, when they need them, and so that they can apply them in a manner that's very efficient to them and works well in their planting systems and what they're doing. Sure Crop Fertilizers has been around for a long time. We always say we're big enough to take care of everything you need, but we're small enough to do it quickly. You can get a hold of us at 1-800-635-4743. Our website is surecropfertilizers.com, and you can always email me at Corey@surecropfertilizers.com, and with any questions you have, we're glad to answer it and work with you.
Kim Mandarin with Hardy Insurance. I'm here to help you with all of your farm and ranch needs. When it comes to protecting your operation and your family, you need a name you can trust at a price you can afford. Call me today or visit hardyaviationins.com.
This segment brought to you by Sure Crop, liquid crop nutrition delivered right to your farm.
We're back. Now we learn more about the current trade issues between China and the U.S.
We have got to help China understand this other WTO case is about their tariff rate quota administration. Okay, what we learned at K-State, and I see Art Barnaby over there. Art didn't teach me this, but other folks in this room did. A tariff rate quota is you bring in so much quantity at a lower tariff, and once you meet that quantity threshold, the tariff rises. China, when it became a member of the WTO, agreed in wheat, in corn, in cotton, in rice, that it would have these TRQs. It's never done it. It's never, in all these years, it's never actually implemented any of that stuff. And finally, now we're beginning to say, China, let's just be honest in what we would call that as an American. You're cheating. And this is where the President of the United States, our President, has stepped in and said, you know what, enough. And here's another component of this that he's talked about, is there's a document called Made in China 2025. What that document in English says is that they intend to do to the Silicon Valley and in the high-tech industry what they did in solar panels. They intend to build national champions and dominate. And they have the Sovereign Wealth Fund of China. If a company loses money, they pump money into it to keep it going. By the way, in that Made in China 2025, there's an interesting entity where they also explain that they want to build a national champion and dominate. You know what that industry is? Agricultural machinery. This is where we're at in a relationship with the second largest economy in the world. In California, we had an enormous discussion about, yeah, but Greg, we're selling these guys $700 million worth of almonds. We're sending these guys cherries and strawberries, and they're perishable, and if this doesn't work, we have enormous problems. And I guess my point to them during these discussions this week was, we have a lot of problems in a lot of other industries. And my point to you in agriculture is you may not have this problem in agriculture today, but you might have it tomorrow. And I think China made a little bit of a mistake here when they did what they did against grain sorghum here the other day. And I explained to the folks back in Washington, I said, this is what I mean by that. I said, there's no such thing as a grain sorghum farmer. I said, my dad grows milo, but that's not all he grows. And in fact, the guys that grow milo understand this. They don't have any real big access for wheat to China because the way they administer their TRQs. Same goes for corn. And by the way, they don't approve our biotech varieties in corn. Same goes for distiller's grain. They stopped taking that a long time ago. It took us 15 years to get any beef in there, and now we just get a trickle. They don't buy any poultry. They don't buy any rice. And I think there's probably a few others in there I could name that I'm missing at this point in the process. We sell them a lot of soybeans, But we've got a lot of work to do in our relationship across the board in agriculture with China. This is just but one of the things that we're working on. And it's critically important that we address this as an administration and as a country.
Thanks for staying with us. Come back after the break for this week's Kansas Farm Bureau update.
Hello, I'm Dr. Frank Lyons from Kansas Regenerative Medicine Center here in Manhattan, Kansas. Daryl was one of our patients that we did about 7 months ago.
I dug trees by hand for years and years and years. In the process, I wore out my rotator cuff. But when I learned about this process, I thought if there's a way to get rid of this pain, then I want to do it. So we did it, and it worked. I'm not going to go out and take trees with a shovel anymore, but I can do the things that I want to do now.
Well, it's been very gratifying to help people with their painful joints and other entities, and it's been especially gratifying to be able to help people who I know and have worked with and known for many years.
KFRM is one of the largest farm radio stations in the nation, dedicated to informing and entertaining rural listeners from northern Oklahoma to southwestern Nebraska. You can catch KFRM in many ways, of course, 550 on the AM dial, streaming at kfrm.com, or on your smartphone by going to the TuneIn Radio app, or on Ag AM in Kansas on Tuesdays and Facebook every day of the week. KFRM, tune us in. You'll be glad you did.
Kim Manring with Hardy Insurance. I'm here to help you with all of your farm and ranch needs. When it comes to protecting your operation and your family, you need a name you can trust at a price you can afford. Call me today or visit hardyaviationins.com.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Farm Bureau, the voice of agriculture. To join today or more information, go to kfb.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back to Farm Factor and the Kansas Farm Bureau update.
My name is Jim Sipes. I'm a farmer from Stanton County, and I'm the 9th District Director on the Kansas Farm Bureau Board. And I've been working for the last 6 years on the Lesser Prairie Chicken Initiative, and that's becoming an issue again. We're seeing a lot more activity. In fact, they're supposed to have a listing decision this fiscal year, which will end in September. So we'll see where that goes. We had a clear indication last week in a meeting that they're probably going to list it again, and so we're really concerned about where that's going to go. We certainly believe that it is a drought issue that's affecting the lesser prairie chicken. It is because of that drought that we see a reduction in numbers. We do not believe it's a habitat problem that the Fish and Wildlife Service believes it is. However, they do have a recent study that came out, I believe, from the U.S. Geological Survey that indicates the species will go extinct in 30 years. And that's why we're fearful that there may be another listing headed our way. And many of the folks that I work with fear that that listing will be an endangered listing. And we're certainly hoping that that's not where it goes. If we have an endangered listing, farmers and ranchers, we don't know how we will function in that environment. Under a threatened listing, we can still function and do what we do in farm and ranch, at least for most of us, unless we're in prime or critical habitat, which might be a very different issue.
Stay with us. We'll be back after the break with Plain Talk.
Tarwater Farm and Home has been family owned and operated since its beginning in 1978. What you need for farm and agriculture, lawn and garden, clothing and footwear, and so much more. You'll be surprised at what you'll find in this huge store. They have what you need and lots of it. So come take a look. You'll discover that customer service is first and foremost. Always has been with the Tarwaters. Tarwater Farm and Home, 4107 North Topeka Boulevard.
The new Better Horses Network is worldwide. Presented by Lucas Oil. Featuring worldwide radio and TV with iconic hosts like Al Dunning, Sharon Camarillo, Ernie Rodina, Lindy Birch, and Craig Cameron. With American Cowboy, Horse and Rider, Brushy Creek, Cavenders, and Ride TV. Worldwide radio and TV. the all-new Better Horses Network.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Corn. Learn more at kscorn.com.
Welcome back. Now let's see what Kyle and Duane are up to on Plain Talk.
Hi, this is Kyle Bauer with Plain Talk with Duane. Always tells me a fact and never a fiction, Toews.
Your fact or fiction question of the day, Kyle.
Yeah, I
Bauer.
threw that gauntlet down, didn't I?
Yeah.
Didn't I?
There's an international opera house where the stage is in the United States, but the seating is in Canada. Fact or fiction?
Well, I could see that before 9/11, but after 9/11, they had to have changed that. And I'm thinking, what city would that be in anyway? I'm saying fiction.
It's true.
Really? See, I thought maybe it was some other country. I figured it was
U.S.-Canadian border.
Huh.
Stage on one side, seating in the other.
So only Canadians can come, and only Americans can be in the can perform.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a little rough.
That would be.
Making that work.
Suppose there's a barbed wire
How do you
fence.
sell tickets?
Well, I think you could
Sell tickets on the
advertise it.
Canadian
You could
side.
holler across, "Hey, come buy the tickets, boys."
Come on in. Or not.
I have crossed the U.S.-Canadian border half a dozen times.
Okay.
It's not a push.
They let you back in each
It's
time.
not a pushover deal. Oh yeah, the Canadians push me back. they push me back. Yeah. No, both ways. It's not just a push deal. In fact, the funniest one, I had never been to Montana, and it was the only state in the continental United States that I hadn't been in.
Was that the last one you got to?
That was the last one I got to.
Really?
Yeah, and so we were up at Calgary, Canada, and it's like a 2-hour drive from Calgary down to Montana, and it's like close as I'm going to get. So we had rented a car already. Exactly. So we drove down there, and I had talked to some farmers. We were at the Stampede, and I talked to some farmers in an international agriculture room, which is more or less just a cool place that you get free beer and peanuts. But they don't advertise it, and so but if you have, and I got a heads up from a fellow over by Minneapolis to do this, and sure enough, it worked. Okay. So I told them what I was going to do, and they said, "Oh, don't go down to the big one down at such and such. Go over to the one at Porcupine Vine or whatever it was."
Blacktop 2 lane.
It was Blacktop 2 lane. Yeah. Went down there, and sure enough, there was no traffic. Hadn't seen anybody forever on this road. I swear to God, the Green Morganville Road has twice as much traffic as this road had on. Because I pull up there, and I'm telling the
Did you
guys.
have to wake the guy up?
Well, there's two of them. There's two of them. One to keep the other one awake. And told him what I was going to do, and he wasn't terribly amused, but he checked my passport, and my wife was with me. We went over. Well, I got to U.S. side, and it was two farmers running the one over on the U.S. side.
Really?
And we just visited for about 20 minutes. Nobody ever did come the whole time. We visited about how the crop was. Great big wheat field right here. And we're talking about the wheat harvest and everything. And I said, well, I'm going to go over here and take my picture by the sign, come back. And sure enough, when I took my picture by the sign, came back, they checked my passport and everything. I get to the Canadian side. They're watching this whole thing happen.
Checked you all over again.
They searched the car.
Oh, seriously?
They searched the car. Now, I suppose they had a quota of how many they had to search.
Well, they only get like 3 a month.
Exactly, 3 a month. And it's like, well, this ought to be easy, but we're still marking this down as a win.
And they didn't find anything, I'm glad to report.
Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Jamie Bloom, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. See you next week on Farm Factor.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com.